we're on.
All right, and welcome to Mythical Monster Investigations, episode 13. And we have been on a bit of a hiatus. So much has been going on, but hopefully things will quiet down a bit and we can get back to a more normalized schedule. But
We're
for
doomed.
yeah, we are. Anyway, but let's pretend. So, this is our 13th episode, so I thought today we'd do something special. We're going to deviate from the book we've been observing, Probable, Possible, Plausible, An Explanatory Guide to Monsters and Myth, which can be gotten on Amazon. And we're going to actually look at the myth of Heracles versus the Hydra. And we're going to do this because, well, recently the Blood of Zeus on Amazon season, and there's been a lot of talk about Hercules lately since it has been rumored, though not confirmed, that Disney is considering Michael B. Jordan to play Hercules in the action version. And I am not going to comment on that.
There's
You two
worse
want to say
choices.
anything? There are worse choices.
At least Michael B. Jordan could actually get into the shape of Hercules, probably.
That's true.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
Will they keep to the Disney version? Which version of the Hercules are we seeing?
I don't know.
I mean, they already had The Rock play him.
To be fair, The Rock didn't do bad.
No, he did a good job.
The movie was not bad, but I will admit I was a little annoyed just because I didn't know what I was getting. I thought I was getting a traditional version. If I'd known going in what the movie was going to be, I think I would have liked it a bit more. Because watching it a second time, I actually did enjoy it more. Because I had a better idea of what I was getting.
Okay.
But, sorry, go ahead.
I went in actually expecting it to be a realistic take on Hercules, so maybe that's why I was used to it at that point.
God. Well, to be fair, the trailers did not make that scene.
No, they made it seem like it was going to be the mythical version of him.
Yeah, so again, this is why I stipulate you really shouldn't watch trailers for movies because they either spoil too much or they completely mislead you. But anyway, let's dive in to Heracles and the Hydra. Possibly one of.
And since this is a special episode, we decided that since this is a episode of many heads and many strange things, we would use something strange by using AI to make a lot of these images. For this current image you're seeing with the Hydra, that was actually made with Microsoft Paint AI.
Yeah.
Many of the other images are going to be by Meta AI.
And you are going to see.
Anyone worried about AI taking over the world or taking jobs? You're relatively safe.
Very much so, because AI's understanding of basic concepts is
non-existent.
Let's find out. You'll see what we mean, and if you don't, then maybe you should get glasses. So let's dive in to Heracles versus the Hydra. So, little backstory on Heracles. First of all the Greek heroes, Greek demigods, he is the most well-known. Possibly one of the most famous heroes in Western mythology. As far as Western mythology, I mean European mythology and not America. Now, it's, of course, most people know him better in his Roman name, Hercules, which was later adopted by it. He is, of course, the son of Zeus, who, was the king of the gods and also a complete womanizer and a male bimbo, for lack of a better word. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that Hercules was actually royalty. His mother was Alchemy, and his foster father was Amphitryon. And his twin brother was Iphiclus? Something like that.
I think that was it.
Yeah. And he's actually the grandson of Perseus, another Greek demigod hero. And oddly enough, because of...
Iphiclus.
Is that his name?
Iphicles.
Yes, okay. Makes sense. But he's also the grandson of Perseus, and technically also his half-brother, because, again, his father was kind of a man-whore. Actually, no, there is no kind of. His father was a man-whore. 100%.
Yeah,
Anyway,
Zeus got around.
that's an understatement. Now, the thing about Hercules, the reason that he wasn't actually king was because of Hera making a pact with Zeus. Basically, Hera, of course, not happy about Zeus's affairs, which I don't know why you think a sister would be happy with his brother having so many female conquests. But I guess also being his wife may have caused some confusion. Greek mythology,
Yeah.
people, it's interesting. But anyway, he made a pact. She made a pact with Zeus that basically the firstborn son would become high king, and Hera was actually able to trick the goddess of childbirth to cause Hercules' cousin Eurystheus, who would later go on to actually get Hercules to perform his famous 12 labors, to be born first, making him the king and making Hercules basically subservient to someone he viewed as less himself. This is all part of Hercules myth, which is not what most people think of nowadays, because normally when people think of Hercules, they think of Disney's Hercules, or the one I really like, the Kevin Sorbo Hercules with the legendary journeys. Both a little corny, both overly nice, but I'm sorry, they're both enjoyable. And on a side note, Shadow Arfox, what have you done to the owl's eyes?
Hell Hydra.
God damn you! I wasn't paying attention until you said that, and then I looked and immediately saw the Hydra logo.
I had to sneak that in there somewhere.
I see it now. Okay, well.
Well played. Well played.
I'm
You
amazed. I found such a good place to put them where you guys wouldn't see them initially.
No, I was looking off the screen, and when I looked back, I noticed something was off, and I'm like, what did he do to the eyes?
I wasn't even looking at the screen, so I was never going to notice until you said that.
For those on Spotify, the logo that you see with the that I have for the Spotify avatar logo, the owl currently has its eye replaced with the Hell Hydra logo from Marvel's.
Yes. Okay, getting back on topic. So, a little more backstory before we get into this. Hercules was actually born with the name Alcaeus. But it was later changed after Hera sent 2 serpents to Hercules while he was a baby to kill him. But, of course, because we can't exactly have Hercules' story ending there, Hercules, as an infant, grabbed both serpents and, with his already impressive strength, managed to strangle them to death, which is a very famous image. There's several statues of it, and for those of us on YouTube, that's what AI gave us, which, I'm not going to lie, I don't like how baby Hercules is staring at me. Anyway, because of this hatred, they actually tried to protect Hercules by naming him after Hera, hence the name Heracles, meaning glory to Hera. For anyone who knows a little bit about Greek mythology, they know Hera did not care about this. It did not work at all, and Hera was less than kind to Hercules. Would you two consider that a fair statement?
Well, I would say, ironically enough, Hera's the reason Hercules is as strong as he is.
That's actually true.
Because he accidentally didn't realize he found a baby in the woods with Athena one day, not realizing it was Hercules, and she breastfed him. And he bit so hard, the milk from it made the Milky Way.
The galaxy, not the candy bar.
Well, maybe both. We don't know.
Okay, look, I like Milky Ways. Please do not ruin that candy for me. So moving on. But yes, she could very well have been. So bottom line, being tricked, she was not thrilled with Hercules and would actually persecute him his entire life. Now, he, of course, is most famous for his 12 labors. Now, the mythos of this can vary, but there's normally 12, and more or less they stay the same. And he, of course, was then burned to death because of a misunderstanding with his then wife over another woman, and some Hydra blood was involved, but we'll get into that later. He died and became a god because of his great deeds. And most agree that Hercules was based on a real person, but had some exaggerations. And it's this mindset that we're going to look at with this myth. Now, of course, some dark parts of his story were omitted from Disney and from Kevin Sorbo's mythos, as well, it's very hard to justify, even with the tale of madness that they claim, and that is especially murdering his wife and 3 children. The story goes that Hera bewitched him. He thought they were demons and killed his family, which, well, even at this time, murdering your old family was seen as quite a taboo. So, yeah, that was for some strange reason left out of the Disney movie. Not quite sure why. You guys know why?
I mean, let's face it, Disney had body counts in their movies. They could have found a way to throw it in there.
Very true. Very true. Which, oddly enough, though, his first wife, who he killed, was actually Megara.
Mm-hmm.
So they did keep that. Though I feel she wasn't as sassy as she was in the cartoon.
Oh, maybe she was, and and maybe that explained the outcome of the whole murder. Yeah, Hera made me mad.
Yeah, maybe so.
Maybe that was the first pow, bam, straight to the moon. For those who actually seen that sitcom.
I've never seen it, but I do know of it. That would so not get on air nowadays. Then again, nothing would. So Hercules, now some of the things Hercules is known for is strength, courage, ingenuity, sexual prowess, and believe it or not, cleverness. He wasn't just supposed to be a dumb brute. He was actually very intelligent, or at least decently intelligent. Such as slaughtering the giant Anatus, who was a giant who drew his strength from the earth. So Hercules lifted him off the ground and strangled him to death above the ground. Which, well, yeah, that would work. I mean, it's simple, but, in a fight, that's actually kind of clever thinking about that.
For those wondering, this was during a fight where the giants were trying to overthrow the Olympians. If
Yes.
memory serves correctly. And
it varies, but that is one of them, yes.
And this, you could argue this was the thing they depicted in the Disney movie during the scenes where Hercules were fighting the Titans. It wasn't the Titans, it was giants. Because that's the closest thing I found to identify with the Disney myth. The Disney movie was there was a prophecy that in the Disney movie it was said there was a prophecy that the Titans would be released, but they would fail because Hercules would stop them. Whereas in the actual myth, there was a prophecy that the giants would try to will overthrow the Olympians, but Hercules was the son of Zeus. Hercules would be the one to stop them.
I don't care what anybody says. It was a fun movie.
So yeah, I'm just trying to tie the movie to the myth. In some ways, it did get that right that Hercules did fight giant that he fought in the movie, which was a Cyclops.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, for making Hercules, which was very not PG, into a PG film, I think they did a pretty good.
Oh no, I like that movie. That's one of my favorite Disney movies.
Right, and James Wood was apt. James Wood stole the show as Hades.
Oh yeah, everyone loved Hades.
Yeah. Okay, so continuing on, there were actually 10 labors to Hercules' 12 labors, but he had to do 2 more because 2 were not accredited. One of them was the Aegean stables, where he was told to clean out said Aegean stables that hadn't been cleaned out for years. So they were horribly, horribly messy, and they were meant to demean Hercules. They were meant to put him down. That was the whole point of that myth, and he actually managed to do it. And he did it by running a river through the stables. And because of this, his cousin, the king, said it didn't count because technically the river cleaned the stables and not Hercules.
So I heard another variant where the reason it didn't count was because he took payment for the stable.
That is another reason, yes. He took payment for the stable along with, against and overthrew that king with the help of his son Phineas, I believe, if memory serves me.
Believe, yeah,
And if
so.
there are any Phineas and Ferb fans out there, that's where the name Phineas comes from. Good name, so it actually fits. But yeah, so that labor was not counted.
It was
and
the son of the king. Sorry, it was the son of the king. Yeah, the son of the king agreed with Hercules that his father should pay him because he was there during the time of the deal, that he agreed to pay him if he managed to clean the stable in a day, which Hercules did. He refused to pay him. Hercules overthrew him and put his son in charge, who honored the deal. That was it.
Yes. Yeah, okay. And it was Phineas, right?
Yeah, I believe it so. It was Phineas.
Okay. So yeah, and then so that one didn't count. And then the other one that did not count, which arguably is one of Hercules' most famous myths and most famous labor, was the slaying of the Lernaean Hydra, which altogether is a strange myth and the one that we're actually going to be looking for because I've always found this fascinating. And so before I get into it, I'm going to actually tell the story. I'm going to actually tell the myth. Is there anything you guys want to add your thoughts on the myth first? Anything?
Like just in general before the myth. I mean,
yeah, just in general.
I think, yeah, the only thing I remember was, didn't they try not to counter because he had help while he was killing it?
Yes, Aeolus, his nephew, helped him.
Because other than that, yeah, no, that was,
Zed, you got anything?
No.
Okay, so going on with the original myth. Now, according to the original myth, Hercules was given the task of slaying the Hydra. When he reached, which of course at the time was either a 7 or 9-headed, the number of heads does vary. Now, when he reached the swamp where the Hydra dwelt, he covered his mouth and nose with a cloth to protect himself from the poisonous fumes. Once he got in, he then shot flaming arrows into its cave to draw the creature out. And armed with either a sickle, a sword, or his club, he started attacking the creature. Now, of course, famously, what makes this story so interesting and what's really captured everybody's minds is that each time he cut off a head, 2 more grew up in its place, save for the middle head, which was said to be immortal and couldn't be killed. At this point, after slaying many heads and now having who knows how many heads to deal with, Hercules' nephew Aeolus had the bright idea of a torch and putting it to the heads of the beast as Hercules cut them off. This cauterized the wound and prevented the heads from growing. So, this way, Hercules was able to keep cutting off the heads until he got to the final one, which was the immortal head. Now, this head he couldn't kill, but he lobbed it off and then buried it under a large rock, which actually, if you remember the Disney Hercules movie, represents that scene fairly well. From this, Hercules then dipped his arrows in the poisonous blood of the Hydra, and from then on he had a weapon that could even hurt the gods, which was used to kill various creatures, including accidentally killing a centaur, which was his friend, killing a centaur that tried to rape his wife, and actually managing to wound Hera when she was interfering with another one of his labors.
And don't forget, it was after his death, it was used during the Trojan War to wound one of the Greek heroes so badly that he got stuck on the island for most of the war.
Oh
Um,
yeah, that's true.
I can't remember the Greek hero's name.
I'm
Um,
not even gonna pretend to remember that.
and they ultimately had to go back to get the hero so they could get his arrows. Those were the arrows they used to shoot Paris
Yes.
and kill him. So
Yes, and believe it or not, Hercules also did stop by Troy and threatened to destroy it one day, which later would come with the Trojan War.
he did raid the Trojan city because I believe that's how Priam's sister got kidnapped. Was oh jeez, I can't remember what happened, but he went to Troy and he
And
wanted
he slayed the monster of Troy.
yes, and he wanted payment for it as because they said they would pay him. They refused. He got a friend of his to assist him in raiding Troy, and during the raid they took several prisoners. One of them was Priam's sister, who would later become the wife of the Greek king what's his name?
Agamemnon?
Agamemnon.
Was that it?
I be-
What was she the princess of Troy?
I I believe she was because I remember that's the ultimate. I remember his events at Troy is ultimately was like the beginning of the
The
Trojan War.
catalyst of the Trojan War, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I don't remember all the little details, but yeah, that's a good point. And so that's the myth in of its own. And before we get into a possible explanation for how this myth came about, which will probably be pretty fast, I think this is a good time to take a quick pause and play Who's That Monster Pokemon? So Zed, you are up.
I mean, for Hydra, there was an easy two options. One of them being more recent, but the first one that comes to mind would have been the dragon Hydragon, which has three heads. The more recent one is Hydrapple, which is it's a bunch of worms in an apple that apparently equals a dragon. Look, Pokemon's weird. Don't ask me why this is the
I've
thing.
given up.
I'd also like to point out there the candy apple. I don't know
Okay.
why they chose a candy apple of all things, but they
Because
did.
they ran out of ideas. Because the first, let's see, one of his evolution is an apple pie. The other evolution is a dragon that comes that can folds into an apple essentially. The only more apple they could do at this point was either apple sauce or apple candy.
I got nothing. I mean, candy apple Pokemon. Like, I feel like there's a joke in this, but I'm not sure what it is.
And
Like,
then
they're all on a sugar high.
it should be noted that Hydronian pre-evolution does look,
Hydreigon does go through phases. It starts off with one head, gets two, and then ends up with these three.
and its earlier evolution, previous evolution before this is a two-legged monster with only two heads. So it looked more like the Hydra we probably would saw from the Disney movie at that point. Because I believe
Makes
it
sense.
also had two legs.
Yes. Yes, the one from the Disney movie only had two legs. Okay, well, so now let's get into. So this myth has always fascinated me because, as anyone who's watched this probably figured out, I like to try to piece together what could have inspired different mythos. And the Hydra has stumped me because what the hell was this thing? I mean, I think that Hercules was probably based on a real person. And he probably had some form of exaggeration to great deeds that he did. I mean, all the other things they did could make sense in different ways, like slaying a Nemean lion, lions, catching a wild boar. There's explanations to what it might have been done or how it might have been exaggerated. This thing has been very confusing. But I think there might be an interesting explanation. So, the Hydra was said to be a poisonous, multi-headed serpent monster. It was supposed to live in the length of Lernia in the of the Argoild. Now, the oldest appearance of the Hydra myth actually comes from Hesiod's theology, who described its origin and creation. And the oldest known image of the Hydra, it can actually be found on a pair of bronze fibulae, which is basically a type of brass pin. Like the things they use to keep capes together, a brooch. So a bronze brooch, which dates back roughly to 700 BC, and to this day it's located in the British Museum. Now, in this depiction, the Hydra actually only has 6 heads. Originally, the Hydra was said to have 9 heads, and the number tended to increase with each retelling. There are even some stories where the Hydra could have 100 heads. And it was theorized that the Hydra could have been a snake with its offspring defending its territory, which, okay, strange, but not a completely absurd theory. So, what are we going to look at? First of all, let's look at location. Lernia was supposed to be a region of springs and a former lake near the east coast of Peloponnese. And Lernia was a region that had lots of, especially swamps and bayous. And one of them was actually claimed as the entrance to the underworld. And the Hydra was said to have been killed in a swamp near Lake Lernia. So there's a good chance that one of these swamps or bogs is where the myth took place. Now, the Hydra, while having multiple heads, only had one that was immortal. And it was said as long as this remained, the Hydra would live. Which, of course, the actual word Hydra just means water snake or root. So, that's not very helpful. And there is actually a real creature known as a Hydra. And, well, it's actually a very small microorganism. Like, literally, you need a microscope to see it. So, chances are it was probably not that creature. Now, there are snakes that have been born with multiple heads. But commonly, those snakes are genetic mutations born with 2 heads. Now, is it possible that a genetic mutation could have happened where a snake was born with 9 heads? Well, maybe, but it is highly improbable since these type of mutations are extremely rare and also oftentimes kind of deadly. But again, not impossible. However, I don't think this is really what happened. I don't think a multi-headed snake is actually the culprit. So let's start breaking down the myth to see if we can find some truth to it. For one thing, Lernia Lake, as I said, is a real place with swamps around it to this very day. Now, it mentions that Hercules had to cover his mouth for the poisonous fumes. Now, what does this imply? This could imply marsh gases. Gases like this have been found primarily in marshes, bogs, and swamps. The gas, which is mostly hydrogen sulfate, and methane, highly toxic, and may explain the need to cover his face. Agree?
Yeah.
Because, as I said, highly toxic. So, also, breathing in these chemicals quite a bit could have actually caused hallucinations to some people. So that might also help this mythos create. Now, another part that's interesting is the poison. Now, there are multiple types of venomous snakes all over the world. I mean, Australia is mostly poisonous snakes. So a poisonous snake's not a good thing. But the real interesting part of the Hydra is that not only was it venomous, but also poisonous, which I found out there is a difference. Venomous implies that the animal has venom sacs where it can inject venom directly into you. Poisonous implies that consuming the snake or having its insides can cause you physical harm. In short, its insides are poisonous, meaning its blood is in fact poisonous. And to my shock, there are snakes that are both venomous and poisonous. One such example is actually the Asian tiger snake, but that lives mostly in Australia and Tasmania. And while things did travel around, I do find it rather hard to believe that a snake that lived primarily in Australia and Tasmania could have made it to ancient Greece. Although, what do you guys think? Do you think that snake could have made it there? Because I find it kind of
What type of water did that snake live in?
Asian tiger snake. No, bogs and swamps. It could definitely live in
No, but could it
Australia
have
and
made it?
Tasmania.
Yeah, but could it have made it across the sea to get to that point?
I don't know. I don't think I can't really imagine a scenario where it could have. Like, definitely people were trading with ancient civilizations.
Yeah,
So
but Australia? That would have
yeah,
been
Australia and Tasmania. That's a
that
stretch.
would have been
Like,
the Maui, pretty much at that point, maybe.
yeah. So that's a big stretch. Like, that's some space. So I highly doubt it. Like, if it turns out it was an Asian tiger snake, like, I'm gonna need to see a story behind that one. That's interesting as all get out. But the Asian tiger snake, though, is an example of a snake that is both poisonous and venomous. But is because of its location, I don't think it's a good candidate. So, as far as I can see, there's 4 decent candidates for what this could have been. Now, for one thing, ironically, one of the good things I think would be it is the moray eel. Now, the moray eel is not actually venomous, but its blood is poisonous. So it is and they have been known, and various species of it have been in swamps. And honestly, moray eels are terrifying. Like, they are freaky looking, and I think it is actually the type of that were in the Little Mermaid.
Yes.
But I will say, as ugly as those things were in that movie, they are a lot cuter than the real things. The real things are nightmarish.
Oh yeah.
But the moray eels, when their territory is invaded, can be very dangerous and very aggressive. So they very well could come out, bit people, and the wounds could become affected, which may have been seen as venomous, though not strictly. And again, if Hercules managed to kill one of these things, its blood would be poison enough to where dipping his arrows in it could have a effect. Another possible candidate is the conger snake. The conger snake. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that, but again, it's another snake that is both poisonous and venomous. And it's a strange looking snake. And finally, well, not finally, another one is the snake eels, which another one that has poisonous blood. And if you notice with all of these eel-like things, coming to a theme with that is that they're rather bizarre-looking creatures. They look like serpents, but not quite. So if you just stumbled onto things and didn't actually know what eels are, you could see someone thinking that these are a very strange monster, a serpent-like monster, but not quite serpentine. And then one of the final examples that I found was for just a straight serpent, the Rhabdovia keelback. I don't think I'm pronouncing that right. But this is another snake that is both poisonous and venomous. But it looks more traditionally like a snake, though I will admit a lot of them are rather odd-looking snakes. So all of these creatures I described, their blood does the exact same thing as described in the myth. And eels can live in swamps. They can be aggressive. I mean, it does kind of fit how these creatures could be determined. Now, there are actually 6 snakes that are poisonous and native to Greece. And of these, there's mostly vipers. So if you're going to have a beast, a regular snake turn into a monster, it's got to be something that you haven't regularly seen. So something that may have been imported. Now, could it have been vipers? Maybe, but again, the Greeks knew about these creatures. So it's unlikely that they really would have turned this into mythos. So that's where I'm kind of on that. Now, what does this tell us? So we have a creature that has poisonous blood, but what's the problem is that it doesn't really have 9 heads. So we're left with, how did this myth come about? Well, if, again, Hercules was based on a real person, he was probably a member of Greek royalty or a high-ranking Greek soldier, which means that he was given commands. He was told to go and fix things, given duties, because despite what people think, royalty, and especially higher ups in ability, it was only the last couple 100 years that they were pansies. Before that, a lot of them were actually very skilled warriors. Like, they were meant to fight. They were literally almost trained their entire lives to be the best soldiers possible. That's why, for instance, during the Crusades, it was all the nobility that went to fight in the Crusades, because they were actually the best equipped and some of the best warriors, because that was qualified at the time, which a lot of people don't know. That about right?
Yeah, for the
Yeah.
most part.
Right? Yeah, so the pansy royals that we have nowadays is actually a new phenomenon. Not gonna lie, I kind of wish we'd go back to the badass royals. I think they'd be more interesting, personally.
I've been saying for years we need to sell the presidential debates need to be an actual battle. Mortal
I'm
Kombat.
all for that.
Two main.
Like yeah, no, 2-man Wakanda style.
Yeah, two main enter, one president leaves.
Hey, I'm all for it. I mean, who doesn't like to see old people fighting each other?
God dang it.
I'll bet you that's like some channel on YouTube.
Yeah, there probably is. I don't know it.
Okay, so then how this myth came about, I think more than likely, my interpretation of this, how I think this came about, is that it may have had to do with an overpopulation of a serpent that was foreign to the area. Someone was bringing an exotic pet, which people did back then as they do nowadays, and one of these exotic pets got loose. Maybe it was an eel, maybe it was a snake, who knows? But it got into a swamp, and there was probably more than one of them because they traveled with more than one, and they began to repopulate with no natural predators. A lot of them overpopulated a swamp. Now, more than likely, no one actually cared about this for a while until someone important probably got bit. And, once somebody important, someone actually cares about, gets bit, then suddenly becomes a problem that a king or a royal needs to solve. So, at that point, what would they have done? They would have gotten a soldier to do it for them, or they would have gotten royalty to prove themselves, which brings in with Hercules. So, what probably happened is that Hercules, who was probably a respected soldier, was sent to Lariana with maybe a small band of soldiers, or maybe 1 or 2 people. But at most, he would have had like a very small group with him, if anybody else. I don't really see. Bottom line, would have gone into it with the task of getting rid of a bunch of deadly serpents or snakes or whatever they thought this was. Now, since swamps, as said, do produce toxic gases, which, depending on the time of year, could have been extreme amounts or less, they would have been required to cover their faces for protection. Now, the soldiers probably would have taken sickles or swords to kill the snakes, and they probably would have started one by one, which would have been difficult to say the least, especially if they had been overpopulated. And cutting off, and as the snakes or the eels pop out, they slice off their heads. Now, they probably were wearing greaves, which means they weren't as in much danger as just a normal peasant. So they were probably a bit safer, but still, cutting off the heads one by one is going to take a long time. And for each snake they killed, there was probably like 3 or 4 more. So that could have inspired the regenerative powers, because each time they killed one, well, dang it, there's like 10 more. What do you think?
See, I'm thinking maybe it would have been the eels, and seeing an eel that you never seen before in a swamp coming out of the water to attack you, you cut it, and you think you got its head as it goes back on the water, and then another eel pop up and bite you.
Yeah, that's also a possibility. So instead of so that you could see how multi heads could come from,
Because you can never see the end of the eel because it spends most of its time underwater.
right? And some water snakes do that as well.
Yes.
And don't let anyone tell you differently. Snakes can swim underwater. I
Yes,
found
they
that out
can.
the hard way. Yeah, I found that out the hard way. Water milk can swim underwater, and they can swim fast.
Yes.
Ugh, that was scary. But anyway, so I think that's where kind of the regenerative powers of this so-called monster came from. Now, so that leaves us to then, what about the burning of the heads? Well, honestly, I think the easiest explanation of that is after killing a bunch of overpopulated a swamp, after killing a bunch of these snakes, they kind of got sick of it and saw no end of it. So they decided to just burn down the swamp. Now, this may seem like, well, it's a swamp. How are you going to burn it down? But actually, swamps are notorious for swamp fires. And because of the gases, as mentioned earlier, like hydrogen sulfate and methane, they can actually be very big fire hazards, as both of those gases are extremely flammable. So, it is very possible that Hercules and his band of soldiers got sick of it, decided just to burn down the swamp and kill any snakes that tried to escape, which would have been a slightly easier task. But if nothing else, they got rid of the swamps and burned out the snakes or eels.
I'm now thinking the Princess Bride scene with those giant fire pits in the swamp.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And also, after killing enough of them, it's not. That would also make sense. That he was able to take 1 or 2 of them and dip his arrows in their blood, which would have been poisonous and made for Hercules' famous poisonous arrows. And there you have it. A little bit of exaggeration and possibly a high methane abuse. And you may very well have the legend of the Hydra. At least that's the closest I could find to a plausible explanation of it. What do you guys think?
I mean,
Feel free, like reasonable, unreasonable, miss
well,
something,
we can't miss
better.
the explanation there with just a giant multi-headed dragon monster.
Yes,
Yes.
the simplest answer of a monster actually existed, and it was that one.
And there
I
was only one, of course.
I
Yeah.
mean, you say we're crazy, but then we start digging and we start fighting a multi-head creature.
Okay, yes, there are such things as two-headed snakes, but nine-headed ones?
Oh, and then it's just like, oh, well, dang it. Dang it.
Okay, to be fair, during this podcast, we have found a lot of weird creatures, like the boogeress or booger, that weird cat-faced creature that could have inspired the tangleworm dragon. So yes, we have found some weird creatures, and snakes get weird, but they're still snakes. They're not a nine-headed monstrosity.
I do have an explanation for it. A rare
Oh boy.
breed of snakes that share very similar properties to axolotl.
To what?
An axolotl.
Uh, I'm sorry, my mind's going
Uh,
blank.
Axolotl is I believe it's an amphibian. It looked kind of like a salamander, but with a big dopey looking face with little fins on the side or little gills on the side. Um, it has very crazy regeneration properties where you can cut limbs off, it'll grow it back. Some people have even cut parts of its heads off, and
Oh yeah, those things. Aren't there Pokemon based on that thing?
yes, I believe well, that Pokemon based on everything.
That's true.
It could have been a snake that had those properties of an axolotl.
Well, I mean, that's not impossible, but they're tiny, aren't they?
Yeah, they're super tiny.
Like,
They're the size of a salamander, so they're not that big.
right? They can fit inside your hand, and they're also adorable.
Yes.
Well, I guess adorable's probably in the eye of the beholder, but I don't think they're aggressive. But you think that there is something that could snake or an eel possibly with its more regenerative properties.
I mean, the fact that we found one animal that had that type of regeneration properties, I mean,
Yeah,
it's,
that's fair.
it's and here's the killing part. They generally do live in dark places like caves and maybe even a swamp-like place. So it's a stretch, but no, that's the only other thing I could ever think of where I'm like, well, we can't say we've never seen an animal that can't grow limbs or heads back because we kind of have.
And to be fair, we had a discussion earlier. Snakes, when their heads are cut off, can actually continue to bite and wriggle around because of the way their nervous system is built. So the immortal head doesn't seem completely far-fetched. I mean, especially if a head actually stayed above the water and kept snapping. So it's not completely impossible. I mean, right?
Yeah, no, it's
No.
not impossible. It's very unlikely, but it's. I mean, it's tough to say because at the same time you also got to acknowledge you would expect. Yeah, you expect soldiers to tell tall tales, and it's very it's very likely that it was just a group of snakes and they decided to blow the story up into larger than myth where it was a giant monster that had multiple heads and we killed it type deal. So it's either one hell of a tall tale by some soldiers, by a noble and his entourage. Oh,
Which could be seen, or well, maybe who knows? Maybe they're. Well, that's just it. That's the or that bothers me. I really don't know what else. This is the best explanation I've ever been able to come up with for this myth. I really don't know what else this could have been. Because I have scoured creatures looking for what could have possibly been a 9 or even 6-headed, snake-like creature, but I've got nothing. Like, again, this was the most reasonable explanation I could come up with, which is why I think I find this myth so fascinating. Why I think many people find this myth fascinating is just because the Hydra is a very odd creature. I mean, no?
No, it's a very interesting creature. Tough call because that's the thing. Most snakes that we know of don't have regenerative properties of if you cut the tails off, they're not gonna grow another one back. That's pretty much it for its tail. I don't know about eels though.
I'm not sure either, but
Oh, but eels may actually be able to.
really.
Eels do have the ability to grow back tails sometime and fins because fish do.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting.
Eels can regenerate their fins and their tails and even parts of their internal organs.
Huh, maybe it was an eel then. I mean, to be fair, eels are like serpentine enough to, be described as serpentine while still being odd looking enough to be described as some kind of monster, which is why I thought they were a good candidate in the first place. And like you mentioned, the way eels attack and go back under, it could be seen as cutting off one head, the rest of the body falls under, and then two more pop up, creating myth, especially again if some of the soldiers may have gotten a little bit, high or drunk off the methane.
Well, the other thing that made me think it was the eel. Eels actually, snakes don't usually group together. Eels do.
Yeah, that's another point.
Eels will bundle together into a large group to the point that it'll look like they're just one.
Yeah. Yeah, snakes are more solitary creatures. Though they can group up, it's very rare. They don't usually bunch up, they more surround things, if anything.
And if you've ever seen some of the images of eels grouped together, there's a lot like I go back to Little Mermaid with the you always saw those two eels together half the time, coming out of the cave together and stuff like that. Oftentimes you do see eels grouped up and all on top of each other.
That's true.
Maybe it was an eel because it seemed like eels actually do have the regeneration properties.
And again, many species of them, their blood is actually poison. So that does fit with the mythos.
And oh shoot, of course, moray eels are known for grouping together.
So yeah, the moray eel. I mean, considering how terrifying looking those things are, we could be looking at the origin of the Hydra. So again, this was the best explanation I could come up with. But I'm always open to hearing, like, if someone has a better explanation, by all means, tell me. Because I got nothing. Like, this was, after ages trying to figure it out, this is what I came.
We actually travel to Greece and see a giant multi-headed serpentine monster just come out of the swampland. They're like, oh, shit, it was legit. Everything's real. Everything legit. Okay, never mind.
Okay, so which one of us is going to be stupid enough to fight it, and which one of us is burning its heads?
I'm not. I'm taking a picture. I'm running.
Zed, what about you? I think Zed is checked out.
Zed's already gone. No, Zed's already ran. That's his response.
I mean, you can do whatever you want. I'm just going to walk away and go get a drink.
Okay, so the bottom line I'm hearing is that it's my job to try to fight this thing, or that I'm crazy enough to fight this thing.
No, I'm crazy enough to fight it. I just don't give a shit. I'd see it and go, no, not today.
Like I said, when we start seeing the monsters, that's when I'm out. I'm not gonna Scooby-Doo that shit. I'm pulling a Shaggy and the Scooby-Doo. I'm zoinks and I'm all, there's a dust trail.
Okay, to be fair, with our luck, more than likely, it's never going to be a guy in a mask.
No.
Like, it will never be a guy in a mask. Unfortunately.
No.
Well, unless you guys have a better explanation, I'm afraid that's all I've got for the Hydra. Guys, got anything else you want to add?
No,
Since they based a Pokemon off of an apple, do you think a Hydra would taste like an apple?
Well, I mean, his blood is supposed to be poisonous, so. Well, oh my goodness, this is a deep cut. Apples technically are poisonous. The apple seeds.
Yeah.
Eat too many of them, and that's cyanide.
Yeah, that's true. That's why you don't eat apple seeds.
I don't know if Hydra apple was supposed to be that deep of a cut, but it's a Hydra-like creature that technically it would be poisonous, because if it had apple seeds, that would actually be a poisonous thing to people to eat.
I'm just thinking maybe the Hydra logo, instead of a skull, should be an apple.
It's red.
Yeah, I know. That's why I thought about it.
I gotta remember, take those out, otherwise they're gonna be in like every other episode. episode.
Yeah, you might want to remember those. Well done, though. Honestly, if they weren't so bright red, I probably wouldn't have.
Yeah, it was a fast patch job. If I had more time, I probably could make them match the same red.
Still, well done.
Hell Hydra.
Captain America is going to be coming for you one day.
Oh yeah. He's gotta get in line because I mean, if that universe happened, I'm looking to get some of the other heroines to come after me instead.
Go for your spider.
Oop, you cut out there. Well, did we lose Archimage?
So I was going to say, so you're going to go for your Spider-Man harem?
No, I don't have the Peter Parker luck.
Fair enough.
What luck?
Which Peter Parker?
Yes. Every iteration of Peter Parker always get at least 2 women. A Gwen and a Mary Jane, at the very least.
That is so bloody true.
And if the comics are to go by anything, one dies and one ends up leaving you for some random guy she met and knew for like 2 days.
Yeah.
So real life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's sad.
That's why I call it the Parker luck.
Damn, comics hit hard sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, on that cheery note, this is Archimage, and I hope you've enjoyed.
Wait, we were still on?
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, that's how much I've been paying attention to that conversation.
Yeah,
I thought we were done, and then you started talking about comics.
No, we were still on. We got sidetracked. Okay, then.
That's gonna be an interesting ending to this episode.
Okay.
So before we say anything else, I'm Archimage. I thank you for joining us for this special edition. Next time, we're going back to our continuation of the book, where we'll be looking at Berserkers, I believe.
Yes.
Which will probably be a relatively short episode, so it'll be fun. And now we're going to be signing off. Sid, any last words?
No.
There we go.
Good to know. All right.